I hope that's what we'll be able to do together. Tonight, I don't know if you all saw the bulletin announcement, but this is the first of a 4-part series. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what we're going to do over the next 3 weeks in addition to what we're doing tonight. But for now, let's just focus on what identity is. And you've got a couple of cues already just by what the title is, and also you were asked kind of what makes you unique. So it starts to answer that question of, who am I? It's kind of a weird question, isn't it? I mean, it feels like that's only a question that someone asks if they're having amnesia or something like that. Who am I? Right? But of course, it can go deeper than that in terms of what does it mean. I think for me, the answer starts like, if someone asks me, who are you? I would say, well, I'm Stephen Yungbluth. I start with my name, right? And my name tells you a little bit about who I am. If I say Stephen Yungbluth versus Steve Yungbluth, that might even tell you something about my identity. Do I see myself being formal? I said probably why my son Nick was named by Nick, right? That's less formal. Nicholas has a lot of syllables. He's got a lot of long, complicated last name. You can see him going for Nick, but I don't know, it's always been Yungbluth. I can identify with that. I grew up with the same last name. So I usually go by Steve a lot of times, but in my department at NKU, there's at least 3 other Steves. There have been for always. And so I tend to go by Stephen when I'm at work. And our last names used to tell us a lot about who we are, especially when we were in smaller communities. Oh, you're a Yungbluth, all right, so that tells you some things. Well, I remember when I was in college, you have to know I went to high school in Pittsburgh, but I grew up here in Cincinnati. All my cousins are here in Cincinnati. My cousin John Yungbluth went to St. X. And so when I went to college here at Xavier University, and I was meeting a lot of other people, a lot of people who went to St. X, like, oh, do you know John Yungbluth? Yeah, it's my cousin. You know, we're the same age, and so had a lot of peer groups. But my cousin and I are pretty different people, so their expectations of me, because I was a Yungbluth, might not have always been fulfilled, because, you know, John and I are really different. So anyway, our names tell us something about ourselves, but only the beginning of the story, right? When I ask myself, who am I, and I think about what is my identity, I've already shared with you, I'm a father. That's a major part of my identity, day in and day out. I'm also a brother. My brother also went to Xavier University, and so did my sister. And my brother just had his reunion. I think it was the 20-year reunion. He got to walk on the basketball court at the exhibition game every night. I'm also a son. My dad also went to Xavier University, but he had a very different experience. He was in ROTC. He grew up in Evanston, right down the street from here. An uncle, cousin, and I'm a friend. But there's other ways I can answer it. Like, again, a more formal way. Not just Stephen, but I'm Dr. Yungbluth, Associate Dean of the College of Informatics and Associate Professor of Communication. That's a mouthful. You know, I was just in a meeting with the Dean of the Law School, and he just, like, you know, after my big long title, I was like, I'm just the Dean of the Law School. I don't have a cool long title or whatever. I was like, well, actually, this position is a little bit more important than mine, but, you know, whatever. It sounds really important. Right? But honestly, I don't try not to make a big deal of that. In fact, like in the bulletin, it says I'm an assistant dean. Now, if that was something that was shared at NKU, I might have tried to correct it. Like, no, I'm not an assistant dean, I'm an associate dean. Because people at the university would know the difference, right? But here's like, does anyone know what the difference is between an assistant dean and associate dean? No. So it doesn't matter, right? Plus, it probably makes me sound like I'm all hoity-toity. Oh, you're associate dean. Ooh, you know. So again, that's not part of what I want to express about myself, about my identity. So it's not something that I wanted to make a big to-do about in terms of correcting that information. But part of my professional identity is I'm a teacher, I'm a researcher, I'm a member of many committees, I'm a speaker, I'm a facilitator, and I'm a mediator. And each of those kind of has a different identity to it. I'm also a musketeer, I'm a wildcat. I went to the UK for grad school. I'm a Norse, I work there. And a Sun Devil? Put a question mark there. I taught at ASU before I took the job at NKU. And I'm trying to decide, am I the Sun Devil? Is that part of my identity? I mean, I have some shirts from my wardrobe, but I haven't worn them in a really long time. I should probably give them away. My black hat or she probably would get rid of them. Maybe I don't have them anymore. Maybe she did give them away. I still have friends who teach at ASU, but I don't really like watch any of their games or do anything else. So maybe that's not a part of my identity anymore. Maybe it's part of who I was, and not who I am. Which is interesting. I'm an American. Probably an identity I share with everybody in here, I think. I don't know. I'm a Catholic. I'm I'm a musician, I'm an athlete. Those last two, I kind of pondered, like, should I put those on? I'm not a very good musician, I'm not a great athlete, but, you know, I've always participated in athletics. I love music, it's a major part of, you know, the way I see myself, but again, I basically do music for my own pleasure. It's not like I even play mass or anything like that. So does that mean, so am I a musician or am I not? Am I an athlete or am I not? And I decided to put them on because I was reminded of one of my favorite poems. It's called the Desiderata, and I'm just going to share one line with you from that. It says, if you compare yourself with others, you may become vain or bitter, for always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. So, look, I know I'm not the best musician in the world. I know a lot of really good musicians, and I know musicians who are better than that, right? They have a hard time comparing themselves with others. And, you know, same way as an athlete. And an athlete is kind of a vague and general one. Like, I was thinking about what I would have said if I was in high school. I might have said, it might have been more specific, I'm a tennis player, because I played on the tennis team, right? But, you know, I used to play tennis pretty competitively, not that long ago. But I hurt my knee recently and kind of not played competitively for a while. So I'm just kind of sitting there if they say I'm an athlete. Maybe I'll play tennis again someday, maybe I'll go skiing at some point. But again, that's just, again, some of the things I like. Another way I could describe myself, I was talking about my identity, I'm caring, I'm enthusiastic, detail-oriented, and I'm humble. Now again, I probably wouldn't have been able to make that last time. I'm humble if I made a big deal. I'm Dr. Yungbluth, Associate Dean, you know. It doesn't sound like someone's very humble. Right? So an identity is something that I aspire to. It's something I have to enact every day, and it gets negotiated. And again, it depends on where I'm at, right? In certain situations, I might not share that I'm a UK grad, right? Or certainly, by saying I'm a Wildcat rather than saying I'm a UK grad, suggests I have an affiliation to the sports teams, rather than saying, well, that's where my degree is from my academic, or my academic home was, or anything like that. So anyway, that's me. Who are you? So we have a big group here today, and I'd like you to take a few minutes to just think about like how you would answer the question of who am I? And you can see a lot of the things that I've presented, and even I saw on the sign-in sheet. We define ourselves partially by our relationships. So you can now talk about the different relationships that you're finding. Are you a brother? Are you a son? Your daughter? Sister? Any of those things. Do we have paper easily accessible?
In the red folder.
In the red folder.
And we're
Think about all the different ways that you might define yourself. And you're not limited to the different ways that I presented there. You might have some other creative ways. In fact, like that. And some of you talked about what makes you unique. So you can talk about some of that. And then once you have it, I'll give you a few minutes to like kind of write down some of your thoughts. So then I would like you to be able to share it a little bit in groups at some point. And it'll be easier to remember all the different things about your identity that are that you have. So that's why we're. So when we go to share who we are, it's kind of an experience of making yourself vulnerable a little bit. Like I said, you know, I'm a musician. If anyone ever heard me play guitar, they might laugh. You think you're a musician? You know? So that's a risk that I took when I shared that. And if other people are sharing things like that, we want people to feel comfortable. And I know you have your mission, right? So I want to refer to this real quick. We're at BYG. We need to explore our relationship with God and to build community with each other. We come with an open heart. We respect each other's thoughts and beliefs. We participate by listening thoughtfully and contributing relevant ideas. So, I mean, this should already be a safe space for you. I mean, you know, part of our shared identity is that we are people who come together on Sunday afternoons to participate in the youth group at Bellevue Chapel. So that kind of makes us have some shared identity here. And I know some of you probably go to school together. I know a lot of you come from a lot of different schools. And you know, some people in this group, even though you don't go to school from here, might know pretty well. Some people you might not know particularly well. I'm going to suggest that when it comes time for sharing, that you might form groups of 4 to 6, not just yet. And in that group of no more than 6, but probably more than 3 if you get there. It might be interesting to do this with people who do not already have a sense of who you are, right? Because it almost feels like a test at that point. Like, wait a minute, I didn't know that about you. Or, here, I can do this for you. Let me tell you who you are. I know who you are, right? And so you get that opportunity for self-definition. One of the things about this, in addition to respecting each other and kind of creating that safe space, is also, as a people of God, we believe that we are worthy of love and acceptance. And that makes all the difference. And that's something that's going to be challenging for us as we think about whether we are comfortable with our identity and who we want to be in addition to who we are, right? So I want to give you a couple of minutes to share with others. And then, like I said, just real quickly, just some ideas that you have. Not a whole lot of depth because we don't have a lot of time. I want to move on. But I do want to give you that chance to share. And just think about what it is like for you to share what's on your sheet there with other people. Okay? And then we'll talk about that. Okay? We won't have time to get from everybody, but we'll talk about the experience of sharing with others. So let me go ahead and ask you to form some groups. Like I said, maybe not the people right next to you, but maybe so. Just for the sake of convenience, it doesn't really matter. But I encourage you to try and seek out some different people. But we need to get groups moving, so start now. So as we think about who we are, and sharing with people in a forum like this, hopefully that makes it easy to be honest. But it can be hard to be honest with people. I was thinking about, like, you know, it'd be really easy to claim an identity that, well, people don't know, you know, what I'm really like at school. If, you know, you're talking to someone from a different school or anything like that. But there's a real sense of, well, we're going to use the word authenticity quite a bit, and connection with people. When you feel like you've been able to share who you really are, like with others. Like I said, we can share who we are without fear of being judged, without fear of anything else, that we believe that we're worthy of love, everything like that. When I think about who we want to be, I said, I want to be a musician, I want to be an athlete. It takes some courage, I said, for me to share it, because I'm sharing that I'm imperfect. I'm not the best musician, I'm not the best athlete. And it's really easy to get attached to certain things. Like I said, it would be easy for me to get attached to, well, I'm associate team, I'm not assistant team, right? And we get attached to these ideas of who we should be, or who we think we should be. And I think it's important to keep in mind, again, just who we are. There's a real, that comes from that. Probably my peak experience of kind of discovering who I am was when I was in high school. I was a senior in high school. I was in a youth group, not too different from this. I don't know, it probably was very different from this, but it was an interesting experience because I ended up, my parents moved away halfway through my senior year in high school. I ended up moving in with the person who was kind of like in the soup position, right? And my Sue used to get on my case about, you going on retreat? You going on retreat? You going on retreat? And I always had a reason to not go. Then once I knew I was moving in with her, I was like, well, I might as well go, because I'm never going to do the end of it until I go. So I went on retreat. And that was my first retreat ever. And it was such a great experience. Like I said, I got very involved with campus ministry when I was in college. I just couldn't get enough retreats. I was like, oh, give me more, give me more, give me more. And what was so great about that first experience was, again, I met with people who were not just people from my high school. I met, you know, people from all over the area. And even though we were strangers, we were able to open up, be who we were. And I got that sense of security that I was worthy of love, that I was worthy of belonging. Like, I never knew for sure. I felt like I did okay in high school. I had friends and everything like that. But, you know, there's always that sense of, like, do people really, you know, like, I just felt like I was on a tightrope. And I realized that it doesn't matter so much. And so I became a little bit more secure in that. I didn't need external validation anymore. Because I knew that there were some people out there who accepted me for who I was. And that was really important to me. And it really, those became my real friends. You know, I think about, like, I went to high school in Pittsburgh, in college here. I said my parents moved away, so I didn't have a reason when I went home on breaks and stuff like that. I didn't go back to Pittsburgh, so I didn't see all my friends from high school or anything like that. The people who I kept in touch with were the people who I had those major connections with at that authentic level, we had a genuine, you know, relationship with. In fact, the only person from Pittsburgh who went to my wedding many, many years later was someone who I met on that retreat. It's kind of crazy, you know, like to think about how that happened. So, you know, it's funny when we talk about what makes a true friend or what makes a real friend, it's important we get past not just in real life versus on Facebook or some other social media platform. That, you know, thinking about someone who we can trust with that information, I think really kind of can define that type of relationship. So that's one of my thoughts about kind of what it's like for me to share and like some of the benefits of that. I don't know what it was like for you. Again, we don't have time to hear from everybody, but like, does anyone want to share anything about that kind of sharing experience you just had?
It must all be introverts.
Like that. I mean, it was a very intense weekend experience. You guys kind of meet once a week and kind of build up over time those relationships, those connections. And I mean, honestly, although we had some things in common, there were a lot of things that were very different about us, you know, the people we met. And the fact that we were accepted for those differences, I think, was really great. So, anyone else? All right, then I want to move on. That's fine. So, as I said, I want to talk a little bit about God's love, because when we think about all those things about who we are, right, and how some of these things, did anyone find that when you wrote these things, did you put them in like any priority order? Like some things are more important to you than others? Well, like, yes, I do this, but that's not really a major part of who I am. Maybe even just as you were writing it, in terms of maybe you censored that way, because there were some things that didn't make the list. Because although it might be part of who you are, some people might know that, other people maybe not so much. Experiences like that? Well, I wanted to come back to this because what do you think God cares about that? Does God care whether I'm a musketeer or a wildcat? I don't think so. Does God care that I'm a professor instead of an engineer, instead of a fast food worker? No. Why not? Why doesn't God care about that? God loves all of us, right? Like some of the stuff, like I said, some of the stuff I can get really attached to. That's really important to me because that's who I am. But God loves me no matter what I am. When I think about the difference between who I want to be and who I am, all right, so I'm not the greatest musician. It doesn't matter. God loves it when I make music. God loves the fact that I try when I play sports. And that it brings me joy. That's what God wants for me. He wants me to experience happiness, right? He wants me to experience connection. So that's what I think is important to God. So we think about what are the ways that we express or share our identity, right? So I don't have anything kind of expressing, like I'm not wearing any of my Xavier spirit wear or anything like that. So I'm not expressing that I'm a musketeer right now or a wildcat or anything like that. That'd be one way I could express that part of my identity. What are other ways that we express our identity? Like that would be one example.
Our posture.
Here, because like I walked around a little bit, and it sounded like different groups were talking about different things, might have had different insights that might be valuable to share with the rest of the larger group. Was there anything that you found particularly insightful that maybe someone else in your group said, or something that you just thought was really interesting about what you saw in the film, or
Finn.
more than one mask? I mean, some of this is kind of cool, like, you know. We were talking about almost like Batman, you know?
That was a bad word.
It's like alter ego.
I didn't.
I'm Batman. What do you guys think? Are there any advantages? I need to act this way, and it might not feel very natural at first, right? It might be a little awkward at times, but you can grow into it, right? And the more you do it, the more you get affirmation of like, no one challenged me today. Like no one, you know, like I put myself out there and like, you know, it worked. And so then it can become part of our identity. Again, our identity is something that is changing, right? I'm sure these guys, I could add some really good thoughts. And like one of the things that I took from that too is that, you know, there is a lot of, I'm sorry, what's your, you don't have a name tag on. What's your name?
Oh, Spencer.
Spencer. Can you kind of share what you were talking about in terms of like, because we said part of the problem was that, you know, it seems like it's fake, right? It's not really who you are. And we can get into trouble sometimes when we put out something that we're not.
Like, for...
It makes people kind of think, wait a minute, do I know who you really are? Right? Now they've seen a side of you that they didn't know before. See, for me, like, I think of like, who said the hats? Is that Charlie? Someone, or Jack, one of those guys, talking about wearing hats instead of masks. And we talk about, like, we wear different hats in different places. And, that's part of our identity, right? I shared with them when I was in college, I told you I was in campus ministry, but I also hung out with the rugby guys a lot. I mean, they were, my roommates and teammates, and as you can imagine, I acted kind of differently when I was hanging out with the guys from the rugby team than when I was hanging out with my friends from campus ministry. And does that mean that I was being fake when I was with them, or I was being fake when I was with campus ministry folks? I don't think so. I felt like, that I was just sharing that part of me. And, luckily,
Each group brings out different gifts, let's put it that way.
yeah.
I hung out with ruggers, I was a rugger hugger too, hung out with those guys, it was different though.
Right. And I mean, it's not like I hid anything from those guys. They knew that I did all that stuff. And, they'd see me at church singing in the choir or whatever, and they were cool with that, right? And the campus ministry folks, I don't know if they were as cool with what I was doing with the team or not, I don't know. But they loved me for who I was, no matter what. And that was good.
I was thinking about that, kind of what you're saying. Kind of.
And again, from an outsider's perspective, they might think, oh, wait a minute, you're not who you said you were. So, well, you just didn't give me time, right? If you get to know all of me, maybe you will see those other sides of me as well. So, good. So, but I think the film does make a good point, doesn't it, about masks? I mean, in general, the moral of the story is we want to take them off if we can, right? Get to that place of being authentic, of who we really are. The problem is that that takes time, right? It does take time. So, why do we generally think it's good to take off our masks? That's kind of obvious when we talk about it. So let's move on and talk about, like, if it is a good thing to allow people to be who they are, to take off their masks completely, how can we help them do that? Because, like, a lot of times people feel like they have to wear masks, right? In fact, they even made an announcement at the school. Be sure to wear your red masks today.
Shows how,
No. Think about wearing the red mask.
I had a pastor one time that told me that I really needed to dress more appropriately as a staff person, as an adult type thing. Here we're set up for dances, I'm on the floor, I'm hanging stuff, I'm up on ladders and everything, and I'm like, I didn't want to ruin my good clothes that way. I was a youth minister, I had my gym shoes on and everything, and, he insisted that I go out and buy, grown-up clothes. Well, I was on the parish plan. I mean, I guess, I suppose at the committee meeting I could, but then I have to, have 3 changes of clothes at the office, practically. It was pretty strange.
I can imagine there are people who say, like, I can think of people, I'm not stereotype a little bit, and you all know that stereotypes are inherently wrong, and I'm overgeneralizing, but it'll allow me to make a point. College of business, right? The stereotype of college of business is they're young people dressed up in a tie, but they don't. And no one ever comes down. But I could see some dean someday saying, you guys do not look like business faculty. Like, you need to wear your suits and wear them every day, right? And of course, there are reasons why they don't. Again, just like Susan's example, right? I would imagine there are times when Susan needs to wear her work clothes, and there are other times when she might wear her church clothes, right? In terms of, like, depends on what's going on. And so, dealing with people who see the world in black and white, like, this is who you are, you must wear this all the time, that's hard to deal with. And that's where I think that you need to work with them a little bit to say, wait a minute, let's talk about what makes sense here. And you guys seem to have pretty good sense in terms of what complexities and things and so forth. So again, how do we help people who might not always see it, like, well, I can't take my mask off. Think about the reasons why people wear masks.
just show.
Like, that would suggest something from, like, I care no matter what, right? And I think that's what Jess is trying to say, is that, I'm going to accept you for who you are or whatever. And a lot of times, again, we want to suggest that we're not going to judge you. It seems like when we say that we care, it suggests that we are making judgment. I care about what you wear. I care about, what you do. Where you're going to go to college. All those different things. Like, there are some places that are okay and some places that are not okay. You get those messages. They're usually more subtle, But sometimes it can be pretty overt too, right? And that's hard for us to deal with sometimes. And so sometimes we might put on the mask, say, okay, rah, 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 I'm red, go red. But, you know, other times, like, I'm not gonna take that mask off, right? I'm just gonna mess up. So I think Jesse's on the right track there. Like, it's acceptance, right? Communicating to people that we accept them for who they are, and that it's okay. Like, it doesn't really matter what else, you know. Like, it's okay. You know, there's times when you want to wear the yellow mask, fine. It's not my thing, you know. But if you want to wear the yellow mask, you know, and that brings you joy, that's what I care about, right? Again, I'm trying to enact what God's love is all about. So, speaking of God's love, unless anyone else has anything else to say about the masks. So I want to talk about interpersonal encounter, because again, a lot of our identity is defined relationally, right? In terms of other people's expectations of us, our expectations for ourselves that we might have communicated with people. Like, this is what I want, right? And then if we fail, it's hard, right? If we let other people down, we can really let ourselves down. Sometimes it feels like we've let the whole world down. And to be reminded that it's okay is important, right? That's why we have relationships. We can support each other in our goals and to think about other ways of getting there, of achieving it. So I want to talk about a book that I've talked to Sue about a little bit. Sue's read this book before. And it's called Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am? I always wanted to read this book because it was referenced like in my interpersonal communication textbook. But as a rule, you know, we don't talk about a lot of church stuff at NKU in our public university classes. So again, this is an opportunity for me to kind of put together my spiritual side with my academic side and so forth. So I'd heard about this book before, and I just thought the title was very relevant to what we want, you know, what I thought would be important to talk about in terms of identity. And you can see it's by a Jesuit, John Powell. And as I read it, I can see why, you know, there are some places where they can see some value in this in terms of what we talked about. He talks a little about some of the psychologists who we think about, Maslow in particular. I think he also maybe talk about Carl Rogers a little bit. Again, there's not going to be a quiz, you're not in my class, anything like that. Just throwing that out there in terms of relevance. But he talks about the sense of interpersonal encounter in ways that I've heard other people talk about. He talks about 5 levels of communication, and he starts with the 5th level that he calls cliche communication. Now, we're going to work our way down. It's like the countdown: 4, 3, 2, 1. And when we get to 1, we get to hopefully the sense of what's a true encounter. Like I really felt like I've got to know the other person, right? The real you, whatever that means, right? I challenge that real you in the sense that, again, I'm different today than I was 3 years ago, than I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Like, our identity is that constant struggle. Like I said, you know, it's something that I have to negotiate on a daily basis. I always thought I was an athlete, but gosh, after I got hurt, am I still an athlete? So anyway, I find those to be interesting discussions. Interpersonal encounter is something that John Powell's not the only person who ever writes about this. Martin Buber's another guy who talks about the meaning of I and thou and just kind of that sense of a real connection. And that's really what we want to get to, that sense of authenticity, of genuine relationship.
Well, and Mary Grace talked about if you really let go of your mask, I mean, you can get into deeper relationships. It's pretty superficial if you leave the mask on and people don't really know each other.
And that's what level 5 is, right? It's that superficial type of communication, cliche communication. Hey, how's it going? What's the answer? Good. How about you? Right? And do you think everybody who answers, I'm fine, good, is really doing good that day at that point in time? Right? It's just what we say, right? This is essentially small talk, right? And sometimes when I teach interpersonal communication to students, I hate small talk. Don't like engaging in small talk at all. And I'm like, okay, I get that. You know, we want to get to this place of real, meaningful conversation, communication, get to the good stuff, the deep stuff, right? But let's not totally dismiss it. I mean, even calling it cliche communication, oh, that's so cliche. Like, you know, we're not going to, come on, we get past that, right? But it actually serves an important function in interpersonal relationships, right? It signals fact that, hey, I see you there. I'm checking, I want to let you, I'm just checking in. And if you say, I'm fine, if I have the time, hopefully I'm going to follow up and say, really? Are you really okay? Right? But if I'm really busy, I'm going to be, okay, well, I'll catch up with you later. Right? I kind of gave that signal, and it's on me now to follow up if I'm really concerned about that other person. Right? I heard it, and they kind of said, look, I don't want to burden you right now. I'm fine. Don't worry about it. I'm good. Right? So we do communicate more information there than what's on the surface. But for the most part, it stays at the surface unless we go deeper. So that next level talks about reporting the facts about others. I'm really good at this, teacher, because that's kind of my job, where I just relay the facts, right? And as a teacher, sometimes I'm not supposed to disclose like what I think, what I feel. You know, sometimes teachers get in trouble for that. You know, especially right now in the election, like who are you going to vote for? No one wants to hear that from me right now. Maybe. There are sometimes, I get feedback a lot of times saying, well, I want to know what you really think. And I have to be mindful of this, and I have to kind of work getting past that. Because again, thinking about, am I playing my role? I'm wearing my facilitator hat. It's another time where it's not really appropriate for me to share what I think. It's really about what you all think, right? So like even today, I want you guys to talk, and I want you to have a chance to touch it. It's not just all about me and what I think is really important. That sounds really, kind of goes against my humble identity, right? So again, I have a challenge there. I did a session kind of like this, like one of these sessions for the Adult Faith Formation Program one time. And Father Bowman, those of you who know Father Bowman, was in that session, and he came up to me afterwards, Steve, that was really good. I really appreciate what you shared. But you know, I want to know your story. I really want to know what you think and feel. I was like, I got stuff in level 4. Kind of was reporting stuff about what other, let me tell you about this model. Let me tell you about this book here. I'm really good at that. But tonight I've tried to share a little bit more of who I am and share that identity. Because again, I want to be connected with you all. So that's something that is easy to do, right? To just talk about what other people think about it. Actually, before we move on, the other thing about that is an easy way to kind of test the waters, right? Well, I heard that so-and-so said this. What do you think about that? I think so too. I don't agree with that at all. Right now, it's safe for me to do it. I can kind of tell you what someone else said. If you don't like it, it's not on me, right? But if you like it, then I can say, well, yeah, me too. I think so too, right? I kind of test the water. Really, if I really shared anything about me, like, or am I just kind of telling you what you want to hear or what I think you want to hear, what's popular? So that next level gets to my ideas, my judgments. And we're going to talk more about that in a future week. So I mentioned that today we're talking about identity. We're doing a 4-part series. So really those first 2 levels, we're talking about the masks that we wear, right? But also we know that there's something beyond that. And how do we get beyond that? So talking about my ideas and judgments, the next week we're going to talk about perception. Okay? Where do my ideas come from? And again, there are my judgments, which might not be the same as yours. So let me tell you how I got there. And let me hear more about yours, right? Because now we are starting to communicate with each other, but I want to convey the idea that, well, this is the way it is, and you should all think the same as me, right? That's where I retreat back to level 4 sometimes. So we'll talk about perception. And then we're going to talk about emotions the week after that, in the 3rd week of our 4-part series. And that kind of is consistent with what John Powell talks about in level 2 communication. When we talk about, we talk about it being gut-level communication. Like now, I'm speaking from the gut. I don't know why I didn't say just speak from the heart, but it's kind of the same idea, right? And the same way with your mission, we have an open heart and share that. And again, we're starting to really talk about not just what I think, but what I feel about that. Like, so now I'm starting to tell you that part of, is it important to me or not, right? And then finally we get to peak communication. And I hope by the 4th week, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to call it. First I was going to call it conflict because that's one of my areas of expertise. But really I think I might want to call it compassion. Because again, I think we want to think about like not just ourselves, but our connection with other people. And when we have compassion for other people, we can really get to that place of connection with them. And it will also help us when it's difficult. So the reason why I thought I might want to talk about conflict is there's difficult times in relationships. When we don't agree, we don't see eye to eye. And how do we hold on to that relationship? How do we hold on to that connection with other people. So I think some of the things about like how we manage that conflict is important. And I think if we use compassion in those situations, then maybe we can get past any kind of conflict that we might experience. It's not
Or even heal
Right.
something that's broken the relationship.
Absolutely. And of course, we're taught forgiveness and so forth in our Christian tradition, which kind of brings me to where I want to close for tonight. Learning from Scripture. So, I was thinking about, I want to talk about identity. Where does the Bible talk about identity? I thought of when Jesus said, "Who do people say that I am?" So, I'm going to reference Mark. He also the same story appears in Matthew, but in Mark, starting chapter 16, verse 13, is the story of Peter's confession about Jesus. So, it starts. Now Jesus and his disciples set out for the villages of Caesarea Philippi. Along the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they said in reply, "John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others, one of the prophets." I'm just curious. Now, I'm not a scripture scholar. I did go to Xavier, took a lot of theology classes, and I know that, the historical Jesus, trying to figure out what did Jesus actually say, and versus like what was kind of stories told about Jesus after his resurrection and so forth. It kind of comes into question here. But in this story, why do you think Jesus asked this question? Who do people say that I am? What do you imagine Jesus thought about people calling him John the Baptist, or others Elijah, or one of the prophets? Oh, I'm sorry. Stretching? Any thoughts? Why did Jesus ask this question? Is he concerned with his identity? What are people saying about me? Any thoughts? Guesses? Yeah, it's okay. Don't have to have it. I don't know. That's why I asked the question. I think he knows the rest of the story. Because in the next part he says, he asked the disciples, he asked the apostles. No, that's perfect. That was great. That was actually a great transition. So then what does he say next? He says, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter said to him in reply, "You are the Messiah." Then he warned them not to tell anyone about him. What? Isn't that the point of having disciples, is to go out and tell the world? Why did Jesus say, now don't tell anyone, just want to make sure you knew? Is that what's going on here?
I mean, he just wanted to build his own relationship with people individually.
People have expectations. I sometimes feel expectations. I'm Dr. Yungbluth. I gotta come in and I better say something smart. Otherwise, that's not going to look good, right? So Jesus might be feeling a little bit like, let people learn for themselves, right? Discover that. Discover what it is. Because, again, people make claims all the time about, oh, I got the next great thing. And if that's the case, maybe, people start to have these expectations that are unrealistic. Right? And so Jesus wants to kind of make that impression for himself, perhaps. I like that. All right, so the story goes on. Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed and rise after 3 days. He spoke this openly. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. I said, what? Peter's rebuking Jesus? I don't remember that part of the story. What do you think why did Peter take him aside? Yeah, anyone remember Peter ever chastising Jesus before? Reminded of, I know a lot of you were probably at the first thing with Brian Shercliffe. Like after that session, I was kind of, I read the scripture and I'm like, I have to think about this a little bit sometimes. So I'll let you guys, let that sit with you and let me think about that for a minute and go on. Because at this, Jesus then turned around and looking at his disciples, rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do." Okay, interesting. So in Matthew's version of the story, there's a little bit more detail here. And it's interesting because like after Peter says, well, you're the Messiah, then Jesus goes on and says, well, you're the rock, man. I'm going to build my church on you, and it's great, right? And then all of a sudden, he's calling him Satan. It's like, wait, I thought you were just going to build a church on him, and now all of a sudden he's Satan? What's going on here? Right? So it's kind of interesting to see the juxtaposition of those two positions. But again, I think it's to make a point pretty dramatically, right, that when we think of the Messiah, maybe this is the reason why he didn't want to be public about it, right? Because people were thinking he would come as this mighty king, and we all know he entered on a donkey, right? And so that was kind of this different experience. So then this story then goes on, and he reminds them of their call to be disciples and what it means, right? So even though he's telling them not to tell anyone yet, right? We all know that that's eventually going to be where we go with this. He kind of reminds them about, okay, this is how you're going to go about that business of being a disciple. And for us, as listeners of this is kind of treating this as Holy Scripture, it makes us wonder, is this part of our identity? Like, I didn't put that on mine. I am a disciple. Did you? Anyone? All right, we got one. Good, right? And it probably should be on all of ours, but sometimes we need to be reminded of all of that, right? So, anyway. The story goes on. It says, he summoned the crowd with his disciples and said to them, whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and of that of the gospel will save it. What profit is there for one to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? What could one give in exchange for his life? Whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this faithless and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. Some pretty heavy stuff here. So I'm just going to share with you some thoughts and questions, and again, maybe you can take this and think about it. And if you have any great insights, you can maybe share them next week. But I want to wrap this up a little bit and think about this last passage in terms of what ways do people attempt to save their life and in the process lose it. I mean, I think it probably has something to do with that sense of, like, you're thinking like a human being and not like God, right? And so he's kind of continuing on that theme here a little bit. And then, what ways, on the other side, do you suppose people can lose their life for the sake of Jesus? Like, what do you have to do? I mean, does that mean, like, literally, like, be a martyr? Because, I don't know, I'd rather not do it that way if I didn't have to. For me, I mean, I know being a disciple is a high bar and it's hard to meet and all. Maybe that's why I didn't put it on my list, right? So, but again, I don't know that's necessarily what God wants for us. Right? We know that there's many ways of being a disciple. So, again, one more question. What does it mean to say that as a result of doing this, of losing your life for the sake of Jesus, that it will allow people to save their life? And of course, we all know that's probably the significant thing about God's way in terms of the kind of salvation that God gives us. So that's what I have for tonight. I know we're getting close on time, and we'll give you some time to go through your rituals and so forth. But thank you. I've enjoyed this first experience. I look forward to next week where we can do some more, what I think is some pretty interesting stuff. I hope you will too.
Thank you.